going to learn a little bit more in this particular lecture. We'll briefly discuss the main call, but we'll have a deeper dive in the next lecture. We'll also discuss the ability to print in order to see our results, as well as the use of semicolons at the end of lines. We'll discuss the basic arithmetic that's possible with Dart, and then we'll also explore single line and multi-line comments. Later on, we're going to see a basic arithmetic operation, such as an exponential or taking the power of something, that does require to import a package or library. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. As a quick note, we are going to be using the Dartpad environment to begin with. However, if you're writing some code and you want to save it locally to your computer, all you need to do is save it with a .dart extension. For example, mycode.dart. Okay, let's get started and head over to Dart. Here I am at Dartpad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new pad. So in case I remembered some of your code that was cached, all you need to do is hit new pad, hit on Dart, and it'll create a new pad. It will always end up defaulting to this hello world example. Go ahead and delete that so we can practice on our own. And the first thing to do is create the main function. This is where all your code for your Dart script ends up living. So we type out void main, open and close parentheses, and then a set of curly braces. And then essentially the rest of your code is going to fall inside of this. So let's quickly explore the basic arithmetic that's available to us inside of Dart. In order to see our results, we will need to print them, which we actually already showed you when we printed hello world or hello Jose, your name, etc. And what you're going to do is say print, and then either in single quotes or double quotes, you can type in a string. So you can say hello. And you'll notice it's actually already checking for errors. You do need to write a semicolon at the end of each line here. So we'll go ahead and click run, and you should see hello. And now let's explore the ability to perform basic arithmetic. So the first thing is addition. So if you want to add two numbers, as you might expect, it's just 1 plus 1. Go ahead and run that, and you should see output of 2. And then if we want to do this for multiple lines, let's go ahead and just quickly show you subtraction. It's just a minus sign, and then a semicolon here to end that line. So we'll see 2. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 10 minus 2 is 8. Let's go ahead and explore a couple more. Multiplication is just an asterisk. So we say 3 times 3, semicolon there. And then if you actually want to see the results, remember you have to run this script. So it's not going to be actually compiling this and running it until you click run. So we see 2, 8, and 9. And then a couple more here. Let's talk about division. So if I say print 4 divided by 2, semicolon, go ahead and run that. We should get an extra 2 out there. There it is. And I do want to point out that you can technically divide by 0, and you can take 0 and divide it by another number. Let's explore those results. So if I were to say 10 divided by 0, we get an interesting result. So again, it's 10 divided by 0, which if you think about it, isn't really possible mathematically. However, if you run this in Dart, it outputs an interesting value. It outputs infinity. So I want you to keep in mind that dividing by 0 in Dart is not going to produce an error. Your code is actually still going to be able to run. It's just going to produce a value called infinity. And we'll talk about that value later on in the course. But this is actually quite useful. Sometimes when you're designing things like widget gradients, it actually makes sense to go from something like 0 to infinity. So we'll keep that in mind. And then lastly, if you're taking 0 and you're dividing it by something else, like 0 divided by 10, that's actually just going to output 0. So you go ahead and click run there, and then you should see 0. Okay, so those are all the basic arithmetic operations. However, one that we didn't cover was taking exponentials, so something to the power of something, like 2 to the power of 2. There is no symbol that's actually built in for that in Dart. Instead, what we need to do is import the math library. So for your imports, what you can do is you can do this outside of your main script. You can type out import, and then they're typically going to look something like this. If it's built into Dart, the actual package, you're going to say Dart, colon, and then in our case, we're looking at the math library, and then we end that with a semicolon. So we're going to say import Dart math. We're going to talk a lot more about importing libraries and packages and that sort of thing. So you'll notice it's actually unused right now. So it says, hey, you're not using this. Think about removing that import directive. However, we will use it. And in fact, once we import this math library, we're able to use a bunch of different math functions. The math function I'm going to show you right now is the one that can actually do a power. So if I wanted to do a power, let's say I wanted to print out the result of 2 to the power of 4, then I'm going to say POW. So that's the function. And then the first parameter is a number, and then the second one is the power you want to do it to. So for example, this would be 2 to the power of 4. And notice what's really cool about Dartpad is if I highlight POW or power, then notice the documentation actually ends up filling out for me. So this is super useful when you're learning, which is why we highly recommend the Dartpad development environment for learning, because you can just highlight something and it immediately tells you the expected value. So note that it's actually expecting data types to be numbers. We're going to talk about those later on, but it essentially takes a value and then takes it to the power of the exponent and returns that. So we haven't actually ran this and printed it out yet, so let's go ahead and run this, and we should see it right after 0, the result of 2 to the power of 4, which is 16. That's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Perfect. Now, again, keep in mind, we're going to kind of stay away from importing libraries for a little bit as we learn the very basics of Dart, but we cover all your basic math operations, at least basic arithmetic ones. The last thing I want to point out is comments. So if you want to type out a single line comment, it's just 2 forward slashes, and then you can type out comments. Comments is just code that isn't run, so you can give yourself little notes here. For example, you could say, okay, this is addition. If you go ahead and run this, you'll notice that you're not actually going to see any change or result. And typically what people do is they either put comments to the right or they put comments, above the code. Now sometimes your comments aren't going to fit in one line, or you would like a multi-line comment. So to write out a multi-line comment, you start your multi-line comment with a forward slash and then an asterisk, and then what you can do is type an asterisk and then another forward slash, and essentially anything in between this is going to be a comment. So for example, I can say this is first line of comment. I can say this is second line of comment. This is third line. That way you don't need to actually type out 2 forward slashes for each of these lines. So this is just a multi-line comment. This is the starting symbol and this is the ending symbol. Anything in between that is going to be commented out. So if I run that, then you're going to see basically no changes because these are comments. And that's really useful if you wanted to just quickly kind of take this block and then comment it out. The other thing I should point out is another way of just quickly commenting things is if you highlight multiple lines or even a single line, you should be able to do control forward slash, and then it will immediately make those all into single line comments. And if you do control forward slash again, it'll uncomment that. So again, that's control forward slash to quickly make any lines that are highlighted comments or non-comments. All right, that's the very basics of arithmetic. What we're going to cover next is this idea of assigning variable as well as data types. I'll see you in the next lecture.